So these four fraternities are all running simultaneously, doing their own thing. And they were having quite a good time at it. The billiards table, which we have on the first floor, came out of the Gamdell Upsilon house. It's the oldest piece of furniture we have. It was probably used by the Gamdells in the early 20s. They played a lot of poker. They played a lot of billiards. They had a good time. The Finews played a lot of poker. They played a lot of billiards. They had a good time. This was the era of Prohibition. And according to Fred Stoiber, who became the professor emeritus of the geology department, class of 32, the chemistry department ran through an unusual amount of pure grain alcohol for chemistry experiments. Apparently there was a lot of experimenting going on in the 20s. The other source, of course, was the bootlegger across the river in Thetford. And there's an old story about President Hopkins traveling across the river one day, going down over the Ledyard Bridge and running up the river to the bootlegger's house and identifying himself as the president of the college and making a devil's bargain with the guy, where as long as the guy sold only the good stuff to the students, he'd raise no fuss with the Department of the Treasury. The revenues wouldn't shut him down. And he wanted to make sure of this because he knew that the students were going to drink the stuff anyway. He didn't want them taking chances crossing the river ice. So as long as they could drive their cars, that was fine. The other source was, of course, Canada. And one of the older alums told me a great story. This was a class of 28. It was his birthday. And for his birthday, they decided to get him Canadian beer. So they had a great big open touring car. It's a mid-20s open touring car. It's got seats up front, seats in the back. It's got these curtains over the side, which are trying to hold the heat in. It's got these huge running boards. It's a big, long car. And if you've never driven one of these cars, short of driving a truck, it's hard to describe just how much oversteer there was with these things. And the braking was absolutely hideous. So it's an early morning winter's day in the winter on a Saturday. It's his birthday. And two of his brothers get him in the car and they drive to Canada to buy beer. And they're driving up this freshly plowed road all the way up the river to Canada. And it's hours up there. And at one point they hit this icy patch. Now the plows were fairly rudimentary. A lot of them were horse dragged at that point, even then. And the roads aren't very wide. The road is narrower than the length of the car. And at some point, they hit a patch of ice they do with 180 without hitting the snow piles on either side. He says he has no idea how they did that. But they ended up pointing the wrong way. They had to drive back a mile to find a place to turn around, and they resumed their trail. But they got the beer. They filled the running boards with the beer. They ran through back roads, as they did back then. They ran down back roads back into New Hampshire through the White Mountains, and they had a big hoop-de-doo.